Ladies and gentlemen, we now move into the enabling ecosystems track. We have a panel discussion on digitizing the product engineering ecosystem. Today, businesses are asking questions pertaining to maximizing value from the R&D spend, refueling innovations across the business landscape, and bringing change to the engineering culture as organizations pivot towards becoming digital enterprises. The solution lies in deploying a platform-centric approach. Platforms are now being purpose-built to create integration that makes data sharing across systems faster and easier. This next session will focus on how the interconnections and availability of data facilitated by platformization is likely to disrupt business models at an unprecedented rate. And who better than our very own, the much loved and admired Som Mittal, former president and chairman NASSCOM and senior advisor Denso Corporation, to moderate the first panel discussion of the day. As I invite him to come up on stage, I'd like to introduce you to him once again. Som is a strategic advisor to corporations, governments, academic institutions, trade bodies, and business leaders. He served as the president of NASSCOM from 2008 to 2013 and helped steer the industry through its most turbulent period. He has also served as on several government and policy-making bodies, including Prime Minister Committee for E-Governance. Prior to NASSCOM, he held senior global positions in Hewlett-Packard, Compaq, and Digital Equipment. He was also chief executive of Wipro, and prior to IT industry, he worked in auto engineering industry with Denso, Escorts, and Larsen & Toubro. Recently, the World Information Technology and Services Alliance recognized him with a Lifetime Achievement Award for outstanding dedication to the growth of the global ICT industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please extend a warm welcome, and I'd like to invite Som Mittal on stage for this panel discussion, and I'd like to request him to introduce us to his panelists.
Well, good morning, everybody. And, I haven't actually sat through a conference for a long time. And, it's great to be back here. I wanted to compliment Ajay, Karthik, Sandeep, KSV. I think this is amazing as to how this is all evolving. I joined NASSCOM in 2008. In 1998, we did a study which said that in 2008, we'll be $50 billion. And that time, the industry was $2 billion. Everybody said what an audacious goal it was. And then comes Ajay yesterday, and he says, we are already $30 billion in engineering services, and he's given a target of $100 billion just for all of you. So I think this is amazing, and I'm sure just the way we did achieve the $50 billion in 2008, I'm sure with all the stuff that we are hearing here, you'll all be there. This engineering and design thing becomes a little more difficult to deal with, and I think you did a super job taking a difficult topic like cloud and edge and made it lighter with all the examples you gave, and I'm sure the next panel would be able to do this, which is actually what we need to do, is to demystify the stuff that's going on, and this panel is going to do the same. When I meet young people earlier and you ask them what they were doing, and they would say, I don't do maintenance, I do software development, and I use these new technologies. And then you met next time the same person, he says, I don't do software services, I'm in products. And now you meet everybody, they say, hey, I don't do all of it, I have a platform. So everything is becoming a platform, and I think this discussion is really about where is the platform, what do we do with it? And I'm really blessed to have a panel like the one that I have. So we have Guru from PayPal. Guru, I'm not going to talk about what all you have done, but here is a person who is with PayPal, and PayPal actually did what we call today as disruption in the whole ecosystem using a platform. So Guru, may I invite you. And then we have Stefan. Stefan works for Siemens, and they have a lot of software products, and they're saying, golly, what's going on now? And how are they going to be, as a product company, transitioning into what now we say platform? So Stefan has traveled. Stefan was telling me that last time he went, everybody had a presentation, and he didn't. And this time, he made a presentation, and none of us have one. So he stopped his presentation. He's taken his tie off, because last time he had no tie and everybody else had a tie. So you never win this game. So Stefan, please join us. And Sanjeev from Wipro represents the services industry here. And services, which were traditionally what we did, customers told us what to do. We started adding value. And how are we disrupting that through platforms in terms of delivering? So can you join in as well? So gentlemen, what we're going to do, come in please, is we're going to break the way we did the previous panels. I'm going to ask each of you in the same order as you came in to give your perspectives, right? And please demystify, say what's different, and anything else you have in mind. Anything, yeah. You have a mic?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? All right, sounds good. Excellent. So it's a tough act to follow, Mr. Padmanabhan. He actually kept it very light, and then Som very generously upped the ante by saying that we should also follow in that light vein. So I don't know if we can do justice to that, but we will try. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this morning. It's a great opportunity for me. I represent PayPal. So let's to talk about the topic, and I'd like to set the stage by actually defining what a platform is and drawing some key distinctions between platforms, products, ecosystems, and aggregators. I think there's a huge amount of confusion between these terms. They're all used interchangeably, and some people use it to their own advantage at times in different ways. So I think it'll be good to demystify that. But being a hardcore millennial at heart, but not necessarily by age, when I look back at my childhood, the word platform meant only one thing when I was a kid, right? It was just one thing. It was the railway platform. Today, when somebody says platform, I cannot think of a railway platform. I'm thinking of basically software platforms that are ruling the world today. The same thing goes for product. When I thought about a product, it was what came on advertisements on TV. The Nirma soap or something like that, that was a product. But today, when somebody says, I'm building a product, I automatically think that they're talking about software. So let's talk about what platforms are and what products are. If you look at products, their key focus is essentially the consumer. They're not necessarily thinking about the producers. Platforms, on the other hand, are obsessed about linking the two. They draw interactions between third-party suppliers, producers, and the consumers, users of those. Their essential job is to build a foundation on top of which different entities can start interacting. And what is the primary purpose of this interaction is to drive value. Now, there's a huge confusion between what an ecosystem is and what aggregators are. And let me talk about aggregators. By aggregators, I mean things like social networks, for example. Because there's a perception that social networks are platforms as well. And the reason why they're different is because in the case of a platform facilitates interactions between the users, the producers, and the consumers. In the case of an aggregator, they start out by being inherently useful. As a result, they start attracting a lot of users. They also start attracting a lot of producers. But at some point in their life cycle, they go from facilitating this interaction to actually intermediating it and controlling it, to a point where they start dictating what can and what cannot happen on the platform, right? And at that point, they become an aggregator. So in a sense, the network effects that are inherent in any platform, aggregators internalize it, they capture it, and they commoditize their suppliers. So that's why a bulk of the value creation of that platform in an aggregator's case is captured by the aggregator themselves. Whereas platforms are different. So Bill Gates actually had a wonderful line about what platforms are. He said, a platform, if you could apply this test where the total economic value created by and realized by the users of a platform is greater than the company that created the platform, then you've got a true platform. Otherwise, it's not a platform. And I think that's a great way to define it. An ecosystem is a different beast altogether. Ecosystem, nobody owns it. It organically grows. It's exactly like how we call ecosystems when we think about life, right? The planet. An ecosystem, what's an example? The internet, the World Wide Web is an ecosystem. It can be regulated perhaps, but there may be key players that attempt to control it, but nobody truly has it in their control. All the different products and platforms and services and aggregators interact in this ecosystem, and it's unpredictable. You never know when the next big thing is coming in an ecosystem, and all you can do is to adapt to ecosystems. You can't truly control it. I think these are key distinctions to draw out. So let me talk about a platform. I don't necessarily mean to plug my company. I'll just use certain examples here just for the sake of illustration, so that you can understand what I'm talking about, right? So what are some good characteristics of a platform? And what do they do, right? One, the core interaction between a user of the platform and a producer on the platform. The platform's job is to distill the essence of that interaction and define it very clearly, so that there is no gray area. In our case, we are connecting sellers to buyers, as simple as that with PayPal, right? It's the same as, in a shopping mall. Why do you go to a mall? Because there are lots of wonderful buyers there. Why do the buyers set up beautiful stores there? Because there are lots of shoppers there. You take one of them out of the picture and the value is not there for the other person, right? So any good platform starts off with the question of how do we create value, not how do we make revenue. The intent is to create value and then figure out a way to capture a reasonable percentage of the value that would make for a good business model. And that's what we do. The second key characteristic is, once you've got this core interaction defined, you then try to start getting user acquisition and interaction. How do you scale that up really quickly? How do you make sure that there are easy ways for these people who are getting onto the platform to start using it effectively and more and more and more? Right? For us, for example, at PayPal, the metrics that we are very obsessed about, how quickly are we acquiring customers? How quickly are we acquiring merchants? Not just user acquisition, but also how often are consumers transacting on this platform? How much conversion are the merchants seeing when they start transacting on our platform? Because for a merchant, for a seller, how many people come with an intent to buy and then end up buying is the key metric that they're interested in. It's not that interesting for them if people just land on their website and get away without shopping. They actually have to close. So those are some of the key metrics that we use. How often does a customer transact on using PayPal in a year? So those are some of the key metrics. So this is important because it has value for both sides. Right? This is what makes for a successful platform. And finally, it has to be a technology-driven business model that can scale. It's extremely important for the model to be technology-driven, because when platforms start scaling, they catch fire. There is no way for you to stay successful as a platform if the underpinning to every element of the platform's success is not technology. Because the only way you can truly scale rapidly in the minute of seconds is through technology. And one key point to also call out as a key differentiator between aggregators and platforms have to be designed to remain neutral between the different stakeholders that use the platform. We cannot favor our consumers, the users, the buyers, versus the sellers, the merchants. We have to be fair. Our risk models have to treat both of them equally. And our security mechanisms should not disincentivize one party versus another. So these are some of the key aspects to keep in mind when you're talking about platforms. But the Bill Gates test, the economic value created should be greater than the economic value derived by the company that created it. I think that's the test that I would use to define what a platform is.
Thank you, Guru. That was very good. Stefan, what's your take? And you could cover any other area as well about what you do and how that's helping customers.
That's a long story. First of all, the software, the part of Siemens I represent, we are into software for creating products, to put it simple. So it's design, simulation, software to automate manufacturing, and then later also IoT and IoT platform to bring it all together, to close the loop between a product that sits in operation back to the developer who's designing that product. So that's the scope. And if you look back, that's very old software. CAD is 30, 35 years old or so. Very different from PayPal. And when this whole thing started, I think in the beginning stages of that, nobody thought about platforms or ecosystem. That was a fashionable word that came later. But in fact, there always was an ecosystem. We just didn't build it very much into the technology. At some point, people got up to say, oh, let's give people the possibility to extend our CAD product. Let's build a few APIs here and there. And, oh, by the way, we should maybe document them too, so people actually understand them. So it was very much a little bit of a point-to-point afterthought. But in fact, somebody from an automaker once showed me the landscape of tools that this automaker used to create the embedded software. And they had 107 IT applications on that landscape. So there's an ecosystem there, and our products were maybe 10 out of those 107. The rest was other stuff. So that's kind of where we come from in that whole industry. And it's pretty much not a big difference between Siemens and other players in that field. So, and I would say fairly recently, let's say 5, 7 years ago maybe, this whole idea of platform suddenly became big. And where also then people, maybe we kept giving different names to the thing we are doing. In the beginning stages, it was just called CAD. And some people realized there's a lot of simulation going on here. Let's call that CAE for computer-aided engineering. And then we call it digital manufacturing, where it's about robot arms and all that good stuff. And data management, eventually this thing PLM was created when people realized this is even bigger. This is about suppliers. This is about interactions between people. So, and then again, late in the game, the idea of platform suddenly creeps in, which really says it's not a distinct set of applications that we are somehow trying to bolt together. It's really about creating something for an enterprise where people can collaborate and work together in this whole process of creating products and bringing them to market. So it's a very much an evolution rather than a big bang disruptive thing. And so we look at the technology, and I think what's happening now, again, the last few years is now we are finally getting to the stage of very consciously designing platforms to be real platforms. And I think, Guri, you defined what a platform really is. A platform is something that is really measured by how does it attract value that others create, not how it sells your own product. So that is fairly recent, and basically we had a chance to create it from the ground up in the space of IoT. So Siemens has an IoT platform that's really designed from the beginning to do this. And what we are in fact doing is we are refactoring and redesigning and re-architecting everything else in the portfolio to be suitable to be a platform, to be completely cloud native, to be home in the cloud, but also, of course, being able to translate to other spaces. And also thinking about who really is that ecosystem, who is all part of that. Because when you thought of it, first you think it's a bunch of engineers working at one company. And then it dawns on you, well, it's those engineers. It is many other functions in that business. It's marketing and other people. It's suppliers to the business. It's the customers of those suppliers. So it suddenly you realize it's bigger. The way we look at it today, it actually includes the 7-year-old kids that go to school and who we want to expose to what product design really is and how these tools work. So we actually look at our what we call our academic ecosystem, also very high priority, because we create, if we get the 7-year-old kids to understand how this all works and how it comes together, we create the people who later become, of course, hopefully engineering students and go into these disciplines, later work at those companies who create products, and we can really nurture this ecosystem from the beginning. They start companies, hopefully many of them do their own startups, who then become suppliers to others. So we look at this ecosystem lately in a much bigger way and measure ourselves by how much do they really, are they able to create value on our products, and how they are to benefit from it and expand it. Again, very much different from paper, where I think these ideas were around from day one. In this industry of engineering software, it's fairly new, and I would also say we nevertheless drive it very aggressively, because it's definitely where the world is going.
Thanks very much. We're going to come back to you with some questions on your matrix of 107 and how that's getting resolved with this platform. Sanjeev?
Yeah. Good morning. It's a real pleasure being here. And I'll share some perspectives from a service industry, where the platform is coming in. We have seen a lot of platforms over the last 2 decades, different kinds of platform. And in fact, it's interesting. It's, even many enterprises that we interact with today are speaking of platforms, right? Opening up their assets, their processes, and opening it up to a larger ecosystem to create larger value, as you said, including some of the regulated industry like banks, right? Or using open APIs, etc. So obviously it's a big thing. And what I'll do is I'll take an example of some of the platforms we have created. We are a services industry. We are predominantly a services industry. In fact, when we used to go, your example of product platforms, and you used to say, we also make products, we also have products, people used to say, you're a services company, are you a product company? Today we say we have platforms as well, and that's a positioning that we are taking. We acquired a platform, we didn't build it organically, and I'll share you how the life cycle of that experiences of creating that product which is today in the market. It's called Topcoder. It's a crowdsourcing platform, topcoder.com. I hope some of you are already involved with it. It's a platform that brings together today about 1.5 million software developers across the globe, across 100+ countries, to enterprises or people who want to build software or design software or test software, etc. So it's a working platform. And if I go back in history, it's a platform we acquired about 3 years back, but the platform was built about 10 years back and the early stages, and it's fairly reflective of all the other platforms of this nature. At the infancy, when the platform was created, obviously the first problem was to drive volumes to it. Any platform, like you rightly said, derives value by the amount of volume of transactions, the volume of users, the volume of consumers and suppliers. Now it doesn't happen, it starts with a zero, right? You have to, so the team initially invested, right? Or put money into the creating the demand on the platform, right? So it was in terms of putting some money, putting some dummy project, creating work, and then orchestrating the supply to come onto the platform. Here's a piece of work, here's a certain amount of money, right? Why don't you go and work and do the job? You'll be guaranteed to get the money. And that's how the initial momentum was created, initial pool of suppliers, if you were to call it, the initial pool of developers got hooked onto the platform. And then they went to the customers and said, look, there's an ecosystem which is getting built up, there are suppliers, and gradually that number goes up. The key message out here is, like you rightly said, it is an investment heavy in the initial stages. You can't generate revenue, you can't plan to generate revenue like a product from the day one by selling it and an AMC and a license revenue. It doesn't work like that. You need to have certain deep depth in your pockets to kind of bring a platform, a true platform, to life. And from a revenue perspective, profit is even longer. You have a lot of examples where you reach $1 billion of revenue, but still not generating profits. So that's the first part of it. The second part, where we stand today, and that's an interesting position to be in. So the platform is obviously working. There are 1.5 million software developers and a lot of transactions coming in. It's a purely digital platform. It doesn't have any physical assets or transport or logistics or warehouses or cars or hotels behind it. Right? It's a purely digital. It's a fairly self-contained platform. It doesn't, for payments and all, it will connect to sub-platforms, but it's fairly self-contained. And you look at the dynamics that is playing out over the last 10 years, additional platforms have come. But if you are a company which wants to get software built, which platform would you choose? You would choose the platform where there are maximum number of developers hooked in, suppliers, where the suppliers are the maximum. As a software developer, which platform will you spend your time on? You may participate in everything. Where is it that you will spend time on? You will spend time on a platform where there is maximum work, maximum customers, maximum amount of challenges which are being put, right? What it drives and what we, jury is still out, it's still, there are multiple platforms, but we believe that the convergence of suppliers, in this case the developers and the customers, will happen to a platform that provides the maximum ecosystem, maximum number of people. It will tend to become monopolistic. It will be a situation, it can be a situation where it's a winner takes all. And we have seen those kind of platforms happen, right? There's one Facebook, there's one Google, there's one LinkedIn, there's one WhatsApp, right? So trying to get over the infancy is one part of it. To be the numero uno is the second part of it, which is equally a big life and death issue, right? Now there are different, the way you go from 0 to 100 is very different from the way you go from 1.5 million to 2 million. Obviously, there are a lot of differences in the way you need to approach, but I won't get into that. The second point I would like to share with you is obviously from a monetization perspective. And there are the usual ways in which platform monetizes. We have subscription fees. But you think about it, who pays subscription? In a platform, the general tendency, the moment you ask for a subscription fee, it's a negative, right? You need people who will pay for the transaction, pay per use only for the unit atomic transaction. But from a monetization perspective, it becomes important. How do you go into a slightly more predictive kind of revenue streams? So the whole idea of the platform is to create differential, prioritized offerings, differential offerings for which you can demand, at least to the customers who have generated and are already consuming value out of the platform, a certain fees, right? And you'll see this again, in LinkedIn, you have a premium fees, you can see who viewed your profile, if you pay something, et cetera, et cetera. The same concept to our large customers, saying that there is a subscription fee, and these are the additional value you will get over somebody who just does transaction. There's obviously the transaction fee. The third part is what is again interesting is the value-added services. As a platform, how do you become numero uno? You have to offer certain value-added services. And that's where you need to be very careful in terms of you're not getting into what you call as expanding your functionality to the extent that you are being a predator to the other people who are using it. So the people who use it are SIs, like ourselves. They take the Topcoder platform, embed it as a part of their delivery mechanism and deliver it. Now, if through the crowd itself, I offer certain services which are required to use the crowd, right? So people who can break the work and unitize and atomize the work and stitch it all together, those are the additional work revenues which the SI generates out of the platform. If that also goes into the crowd, yes, it's a value add from the platform, but then it starts eating into the people who are using the platform. So that's the tightrope walk which we have to do in terms of.
So let me get back to you with questions.
Sure,
here.
thanks.
So, yeah. Do you have any last concluding thing there?
The only conclusion I will do is, the power of the platform, why we feel we are excited. I'll just share one statistics. We do delivery, and we are fairly good at it, very good at it in terms of the parameters of delivery. When we compare like-to-like delivery parameters, the platform does 3x faster for the same unit of work and 2x in terms of quality as compared to the traditional methods. And that's where the excitement comes, and that's why the excitement in terms of platform and the difference it can bring.
So, very quickly, I'm going to ask each of you a question on the example that you gave. So, it's very nice that you disrupted, you connected up people, but we are seeing increasingly platforms, when they really touch the ground, right? They have all kinds of issues, regulatory, with the compliance and so on. So many of our people here would be thinking of creating a platform which is as disruptive. What's your advice to them about every one of them? You name any platform today, they ran into issues with compliance and regulation, right? When you touch the ground. Any suggestion?
No, definitely. It's a very dynamic and changing environment as well. For us in the payments business, for example, the recent regulatory challenges are around data localization, privacy, GDPR, the regulations in India and China, for example. These are all dynamic and ever-changing, and these are things that, again, I'll come back to the point that the technology underpinning your platform is the only way to solve it as well at scale. For our case, we operate in over 203 markets around the world, and we have achieved regulatory compliance in all of those markets. And why it is important is because the stakeholders that use our platform, both the sellers and the buyers, are bound by the same regulation as well. So by using the platform, they cannot afford to be out of compliance. So for us, it's an obligation to provide this compliance. So the way we have solved it is to build a regulatory platform that is part of the overall payments platform that we've built. And again, keeping it as customizable as possible, as flexible as possible. Even then, given that the compliance domain is extremely complex, it's not easy for you to turn on a dime and turn on some new aspect of regulatory compliance and in a heartbeat. You have to take some time to actually build it in, which is the challenge.
So I think that's a great message that when you do this, don't ignore this ground reality,
Correct.
Even though you were a disruptor. You mentioned there were 116 or 107 apps, and some of them were yours. and now you're trying to find a way to interconnect them. Are those people also thinking of creating a platform? And I'm a user, so do I use your platform, their platform, and
In short, I think today we have a much better answer to the problem behind it. The 107 or whatever the number was applications, they were there because many people in that process had specific tasks, sometimes very role-specific things to do, sometimes even individual things. And so these applications were created or acquired and customized or whatever to fulfill those needs. So, and what we realized, the more also products become complex in terms of electronics and software combined and mechanical design, the more the need for those things emerges. There's more people who need to collaborate and work together and solve tasks. And that has been always the discrepancy between the need for those apps and either the capacity of either an IT department or vendors to provide all that. So 2 years ago, Siemens made an acquisition we think was really important by acquiring Mendix. Mendix was one of the low-code applications, and Mendix was started with the philosophy of enabling users, business users, to create their own app very easily without touching code, just pulling and dragging stuff and deploying it. It's widely used in industries actually outside of engineering. It's in banking and stuff like that. But that technology is what we believe will ultimately empower people to solve the problem of creating these very custom things, of deploying them, of even allowing people to make modifications themselves and expanding. And you will probably still have 107 or 120 or 500 applications, but you hopefully will have this in a much more scalable, shareable, and efficient way than before.
Good, thanks. Two related questions to the example you gave. One, if I'm on your platform as a customer, am I stuck? Do I now have to be only working with you as a platform? First question, and very briefly answer that. And second is, if you were doing that same work that you were doing earlier at 1/3 the cost and quality, I understand. So are you cannibalizing your own work?
Yeah, so the answer is obviously you are not stuck. Neither is the supplier, the developer stuck. He can participate in any of the platforms, and the consumer can also, the customer can also go to a I think nothing is exclusive. It will not work if it is exclusive. The answer to your second question, so it's interesting, right? We are, if you look at it, in a way cannibalizing ourselves, because historically we have, the services industry is directly, but the revenue is directly proportional to the number of people you employ in the services. But the reality is the gig economy is here. The changes are very realistic. It's a question of who capitalizes on it before somebody else capitalizes on it, and then you lose everything. So the disruption is imminent. It's a question of how fast you embrace and adapt. I think somebody mentioned this thing, how quickly you adapt to the new ways of work or work of the future, and then capitalize on it. So that's the
So there is a
theory.
transition that you have to work out.
There's a transition both from our sides and even from the consumer side. It's not easy for a mindset, a contract-based mindset to something which is crowdsourced. There's a cultural and a technical change, a process change, which is fairly big, substantial, which has to be bought in to leverage it. But like I said, 1/3 is not the cost, 1/3 is the speed. Okay. So it's not necessarily that it is cheaper, right? But 3 times the speed and 2 times the quality is a huge value for the same price.
Good. So, all of us here are very interested that when you do these platforms, and I'll ask you that question, what are the different design criteria, engineering criteria that as you would use as distinct from a product or anything else?
Sure. For us, I think, the first thing is around security. So PayPal is a company whose business model, we are not in the business of payments, we're actually in the business of trust. If the trust between sellers and buyers goes away, then we don't exist anymore. So security is the biggest value proposition. And for us, the key criteria is build everything ground up with security in mind. Obsess over the tiniest details, look at every corner case to make sure that security is paramount, sacrosanct, and something that you will not compromise on. That's one design principle. Especially important in the age of platforms, because as part of being an effective platform, you're going to need to collect a lot of data from both sides, from every side that is participating. That's one. The second is you cannot possibly build everything in-house. So almost every platform that I see that has technology as its base is using open source software today. The age of a company building all its software in-house and using it to build their own platform is gone. So we invest heavily in not just being abreast of everything that's going on with open source, but also we contribute actively to it and drive the direction in which some of the open source initiatives that are near and dear to us, how they go ahead. So that's one more thing that we focus on.
So I guess security would be true for everybody now, right, given the fact that you're connected. Stephen, I'm kind of linking it to the previous question I asked as well. Do you, other people in this value chain that service a customer, maybe the number of applications, do they collaborate with each other now? Because the data exchange has to happen. I'm designing a part which fits into somebody else's part. Within the company you can exchange, but does it happen? How do you encourage that?
Yeah, the more, I would say, we give them the technology that enables the collaboration, the more it happens. So I give an example, and as I said, 30 years ago, nobody thought about this, so it's not in. But as a recent example, there's a big push into additive manufacturing, 3D printing. And one of the things we created in that context is a real marketplace that allows suppliers and requests of design to have this interaction and to really everyone to go into that market and sell something. So once you have a marketplace that really works and exists, then the collaboration starts even between the suppliers.
So, you know, we've been hearing this ecosystem. He had his own views on ecosystem. And so are people developing real standards that allow everybody to come in? Because this whole standard business is a big game, right? So if I have my platform, you know, I can actually tie in a customer, not in a negative sense, but in a positive sense. But are there standards now? So
that answer varies depending on which platform, which industries. For example, in the banking world, there's an open API standards which are emerging. But I'll tell you something about the standards. Standards also take time after they evolve. Right, the first set of standards are very at a high level. Then you still need a lot of engineering work behind the standards to interconnect, right? And over a period of time, right, it smoothens out. So I think in few of those industries, few of those platforms, they are driven by an industry level standards. In many of them, they are not. There are no standards. They are pretty much closed ecosystems. But it takes time for any standard base to really reach a utopia in terms of, you know, you can plug and play anywhere.
You know, it's, yeah.
I was going to tell this whole thing, open and standards, is something that we debated a lot at Siemens. And I think we have used a different word today. Because what people are really after, when they love standards, it's not the fact that it's a standard, it's the accessibility of technology. And then you can say it may be very closed and proprietary, because like Apple's application store. You could argue it's not open and it's not standardized or whatever, but it's an accessibility for players in the market to get on there. And we kind of are translating it today. Openness is a piece of it, but accessibility and availability is the top priority.
Yeah. And you know, I think that brings an important point that over time will new models of collaboration work. And you know, I was just chatting. I was part of the auto industry earlier, and you know, it's good for me for after '89, where I used to work for Denso. I'm now advising them, and I just realized that two of the biggest companies who compete very fiercely, Denso and Bosch, have actually set up a joint venture to develop a common platform for infotainment and cockpit, right? Because that's going to interact, and you know, you can come and produce what you want to, but if you didn't have those standards, customers will actually be at the other end. So I think we have to be considering many of those collaborations. You know, this clock seems to be going faster than I thought. So we have 2 or 3 minutes left, and you know, we must take some questions from the audience. I'm not sure the way we went through, you are better aware now on platforms, but you might be having those dying questions, 2 questions only that we can take. Yes, please. If the second hand goes up, the mic will reach you. That's both in blues. I'm sorry, here, and then please do catch them outside. You're not running away, right?
Absolutely, yes. I'll be outside after this.
Yeah, please. What happened to the mic?
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
I'm Deepak. I come from Continental Automotives.
Can you put it here and speak a little louder because we don't hear it here?
I'm Deepak. I come from Continental Automotives, having around 17 years experience in developing automotive embedded products and platforms. Generally, as Stephen also mentioned, idea of platform in automotive software development is there from long time. But what generally happens there is we tend to develop a platform as a standard solution, getting requirements from all the OEMs or whatever it is, and then it becomes mammoth, and then the next topic becomes like optimizing these platforms. So maybe most of the my colleagues here or yeah, people here who have this background can understand this, and can you give us some tips and tricks? How do we take care in the very beginning of having or making this idea of a platform?
I can go first. I have no idea of anything to do with the automotive industry, but I'll speak at a generic level if that's okay with you. So I think, while the utopian ideal is to gather all requirements from all different stakeholders and then produce a platform that satisfies everybody, in reality that's never going to be possible, and competition is also rife, and they're all moving either at the same speed or faster than you. So I'd say that one, gather enough people who have deep domain expertise where they're actually in love with the problem, not just the solution. They're in love with the problem, and they have enough empathy for the customer needs in that area where they can come up with a quick, minimum viable product, and then time to market is absolutely key. You just get it out there as soon as possible, even if it has a few flaws, right? Because once it gets adopted, then you build a moat around anybody else who's trying to compete with it, and then you can start iterating and improving over time. Nothing, in my opinion, I've ever seen in the last 20 years I've been in the industry has been perfect from the get-go. So you have to be fast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'll just add, maybe it is not even advisable to do it that way, given the constraints which we'll have. I think one practice which you can do is, we get into this run mode. Maintaining a platform is always running, so it's in a run mode. In between some iterations, if you can break the additional functionality of the change mode and focus the entire team on refactoring some of the functionality, right, you will end up in a situation where it is totally out of sync with what is required. I think that's one. There's no unique answer or a silver bullet to the problem which you said.
Thank you very much.
Just one, that last question.
Yeah, this is Venki here. So I'm basically working for ZF. Same actually, so it's automotive domain. So similar question basically, like we also work for the platform to satisfy customers because market is demanding faster and optimized solutions so that we could meet the timelines, all that. So in this direction, what the problem we are facing generally is that one is collecting the requirement, organizing and finding out what can be standardized out of it. And another thing is come up with the generic designs so that we will have a minimal change when we come with the customer changes. So is there any better way you guys know, or you guys think that how we can organize our teams, our methods, or is there any better tool so we can make it even understand these patterns? Because in the software, the problem for us today is design thinking, so that we lag a lot compared to other domains. For example, industry domains, I think many people have spoke about standardizing the things or optimizing the designs when it comes to mechanical, because it can be touched and felt. So nobody will appreciate the software design which are more efficient today. So how do we enable the standardized designs or generic designs in the software, and how do we organize our teams to think better and collecting the requirements and make it more organized analysis to come up with the standardization?
Stephen.
Well, having been really close and working a lot with the automotive industry, I'm desperate about the environment there, because as ZF, as a supplier, of course, you are driven by your primary customer, the OEM's requirements and their dynamics. So there's almost no perfect answer to what you're looking for. I think what the software industry overall has been embracing is, rather than trying to find the right architecture or the right modularization that will answer all future questions, this frankly has never worked all that well, because there's something coming in that you didn't build into the architecture. So the whole idea of agility in every part of the process, from the architecting to the feature implementation, and really putting a process behind it and an organization that maybe is not the most efficient one, but it's the fastest one to react to a change. That seems to be working best. And as you probably know, agile development isn't necessarily faster than strict waterfall. The opposite is true. But in a changing world, and especially being a supplier to big and powerful customers that you have that can drive any change any time, it's probably the safest way to go.
So thank you so much. Big applause to the three panelists here. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank all the panel members and Som
Thanks.
for that very interesting panel discussion. On behalf of NASSCOM, I'd like to request Som to present a small token of our appreciation to each of our panelists. Please give them a big round of applause once again. We'd like to thank
Thanks again.
Guru Bhat, Dr. Stefan,